Josh Ward, it wasn't easy. In fact, Tennessee had to really dig itself out of a huge hole in the first half, down 16 points. But Tennessee did climb out of that hole, take down Vanderbilt for a win on Saturday. No midweek game this week. Huge game coming up this weekend at A&M. Overall thoughts on kind of where Tennessee basketball is and how they avoided what could have been a really bad week and losses to Kentucky and Vanderbilt.
Right, going 0-2 would have been bad. That would have been a big hit at Tennessee's chance to get a number 1 seed or at least remain in the position it's in right now as the top 2 seed projected going in. Now going to Texas A&M, another projected number 2 seed. This is a big opportunity for Tennessee. A win at Texas A&M would really enhance Tennessee's resume. It would keep Tennessee in the running for a number 1 seed. If Tennessee can win at Texas A&M, that also means it will have played a good basketball game. Tennessee's not going to go to College Station, play poorly, and win the game, realistically, because even if Tennessee struggles offensively, it's going to take high-level defense to slow down Wade Taylor and what Texas A&M can do. So big week coming up, a full week to get ready for Texas A&M in the final stretch. We have 3 weekends to go here in the regular season.
If you're a Tennessee fan, would you feel encouraged? Would you feel a little bit better about the way Tennessee's kind of rallied in these second halves here lately? And I know it came up short against Kentucky, but got the win against Missouri, got the win over Vanderbilt, strong second halves. That should give you a vote of confidence. Or are you more frustrated and thinking like, well, why don't you put yourself in a hole to begin with in the first half? Like, where's the emotion meter at right now?
Well, during the first 20 minutes of that game, it would have been very easy to get frustrated as a Tennessee fan watching that game. I'm sure just about every fan was. Understandably so. I'm sure Rick Barnes was frustrated there on the bench. So there's nothing wrong with that. I am a little confused by the fear or just the overwhelming anxiety that I appear to find from so many fans about the NCAA tournament, because that's what we come back to pretty much every time is, okay, what does this mean for what Tennessee can do in the NCAA tournament? Yes, Tennessee could get bounced early. Yes, Tennessee could fall short of its goals, but that applies to everybody. Look around college basketball. There's a reason that Tennessee is still number 5 or number 6 in the country, whether you look at the net rankings or the polls. Tennessee is in a very good position, a better position than most. Tennessee will have an advantage going into the NCAA tournament. So I'm kind of steering your question in a different direction, but I think that's what it ends up being about is how do you feel about March? And I think having seen Tennessee go to the Elite Eight last year, and Dalton Connect's not on this team, I recognize that. But it's still a really good team that is the best offensive team in the country and will have an advantage in trying to get to at least the Sweet 16 and probably the Elite Eight. I think that should make fans feel good while recognizing there's some things that Tennessee has to do to be able to get there, but that applies to everybody in college hoops.
Really cool stat. I'm sure you saw it over the weekend after the game on Saturday. Per John Rothstein, Tennessee 16-1 when Chaz Lanier scores 16 or more points. When he doesn't, Tennessee falls to 4-5. Clearly, I mean, he's not Dalton Knecht, and anybody thinking that he was going to be Dalton Knecht, I think that was unfair expectations. But he remains the X factor, for me, for Tennessee. Sure, Zakai Ziegler's got to be on. Igor's an intriguing X factor candidate because I think when Igor plays well, Tennessee's just so much more diverse and so versatile. Jordan Gainey's another good one. But, I mean, at the end of the day, Chaz Lanier was brought here to shoot and score. Mm-hmm. And when he scores, Tennessee typically has a good record. And would you agree with that? He's probably the biggest X factor for Tennessee. If you want to continue to play deep into March, I mean, everybody's got to make shots, but Chaz Lanier can't have some of these MIA games.
Yeah, everybody that's in the rotation has a role. Chaz Lanier's biggest role is to go score points for Tennessee, to take and hit shots, and a lot of times hit shots from the outside, but also be aggressive. Rick Barnes, I think, was happy with the stat production, scoring 21 points. I'm sure grabbing 8 rebounds, but it was the way that Chaz Lanier played in the win against Vanderbilt that had Rick Barnes so happy. And that's been a push all season long. Be aggressive. Go take your shots. Get to your spots. And Chaz did that this past Saturday. He had a bad game at Rupp Arena. He shot 0 for 7 from 3. Nobody is going to say that he played a good game that day or that night. But that doesn't change how important he is, and that's been backed up by his success this season. I've seen so much talk about, well, in the big games or against quality opponents, he doesn't show up. Yes, it's harder against good teams. That's going to be the case, and we'll see what he does in the postseason. But it's funny. We had on our show on Josh and Swain several messages talking about what a disappointment he's been, some calling him a bust. And Eric, I thought that was insane.
No.
By Friday, the Naismith top 30 players in the country list came out. Chaz was on it. He's an all-SEC player. He's the leading scorer on a top 5 to top 10 team in the country. So, yes, he's had his disappointing games. He came to Tennessee from North Florida and has had a terrific season and has put up big-time points against power conference teams. He's averaging a big number against the highest level of competition this season. So, yeah, I think Chaz Lanier is probably the X factor. If we're going to talk about what the offense is able to do, Chaz is going to have to provide offense in the postseason. The numbers back that up.
Josh, let's shift gears here for the next couple of minutes. You have athletic directors and key personnel and members of the SEC and the Big Ten and meeting this week in New Orleans, and I think the ACC met last week, and the Big 12 and some group of 5 are supposed to be in this conversation, essentially discussing the future of the CFP, the College Football Playoff. And the SEC and the Big Ten have control over this because they threatened to leave before the last cycle. But when this thing re-ups, not in 2025, but when this thing re-ups, the SEC reportedly from SI's Ross Dellinger, really good piece out there, and encourage everyone to go check it out. We talked about it on the show yesterday. He's saying, hey, the SEC and the Big Ten won 4 automatic qualifiers. Okay, the playoffs can expand either 14 or 16. What do you make of that? Is 14 to 16 okay? Is it too much? Is the SEC and the Big Ten being too greedy, asking for 4 automatic qualifiers? Where are you at on that?
Well, I kind of go step by step with it. If they do expand to 14 or 16, which appears to be likely and is kind of my expectation, has been for the last couple of years, then I don't think the 4 automatic qualifying spots is that big of a deal, because it would be very rare that the SEC would have less than 4 teams in a position from a ranking standpoint to get into a 14 or 16 team playoff. They would have had 4 in this past year. If they went to 16, then we would have been talking about 5 or 6 SEC teams that would have been in. So the 4 automatic spots, that's really just securing the positions that they're almost guaranteed in the first place. Now, am I in favor of going from 12 to 14 or 16? No. I think 12 is plenty. I think in a lot of cases it's more than enough. I'm happy to get the football. If they go to 14 or 16 teams and there are more games to watch and talk about, obviously I will do that. But I'm not sure how that's enhancing the playoff. If Alabama and Miami had made the playoff this past season, would that have made the playoff better? I don't really think so. Again, there would have been more games to discuss, but would that have made the playoff better? Were either one of those teams real championship contenders? No. Not at all, in my opinion. If they went to 16 teams and we're adding Ole Miss and South Carolina in it, the field is deeper. It is perhaps more competitive in the early rounds. I don't think that really enhances the playoff. I don't think anything about this is for the fans. I'm not really sure that it's for the players. I suppose you could make the case, well, if more teams get in, more players get to go compete in the college football playoff, yes. But is that really what they need? I don't. At some point, you have to be let down. If you can't get in, you don't get in. So I think this is about people who already make a ton of money finding a way to make even more money. And I don't know how any of these type decisions that we're seeing being made really push the sport forward in a better way.
Yeah, I think this year in many ways is an outlier in terms of the first round games. Because, you mentioned a moment ago, like if you expand it, maybe it makes the early round games more competitive. And I think many would agree with that. But then again, I do think this year's an outlier. 4 first round games, 4 blowouts. That typically that's not going to happen year in and year out. But nonetheless, last question. What part of that story was more intriguing about what could happen down the line? It's a trickle-down effect, right? It's a 9-game SEC schedule. Do you have that Power 4 component in your non-conference slate, all that and more? Do you like the Big Ten SEC challenge, maybe at the beginning of the year, to where maybe the SEC doesn't go to a 9-game conference slate, but you have to play a Big Ten team to kick off your year? I think that's kind of interesting. Or, my favorite, do away with the SEC championship game, but have a play-in game. Have a play-in game the first weekend of December. Because, I mean, this year would have been a blast, right? I mean, everybody and their mother would be watching that across the country. I think those would be – I think the play-in game would be super, super unique because at that point, you want to hold on to the money if you're Sankey in the conference, but there's no point in having a championship game at this point, right?
I think you're probably right. And I think it's pretty obvious that there is less interest than we've ever seen in the conference championships. And the fact that the conference champions went into the playoff and immediately got knocked out probably devalued it even more. We'll still get good games. I don't mean to be all doom and gloom. I'm still going to look forward to the college football season. And if we can get better regular season matchups, I think you know where I stand, Eric, on the non-conference games against low-level FBS or certainly FCS teams. They're brutal. They are awful to watch. And to be there in person, the fan experience, you get to go watch your team put up a bunch of points. That's fine. But for Tennessee, when we look at the home schedule, it often has way too many cupcake non-competitive games.
Would you equate that to the defending national champion baseball teams putting up 46 to outscoring Hofstra this past weekend 46-2 and 3-run rule 7-inning games? Yeah,
that's not for me. Yeah. And I should point that out. That's not my thing. So if we can get better regular season games, if we can see more power conference, and really it's the power 2. You have power 4, but you have a more powerful 2 and a less powerful 2 in the SEC and Big Ten versus the Big 12 and the ACC. So if we can get better games, and the Big Ten is going to continue to strengthen, I really believe with the money they have and what they've done recently, they'll recruit better. So, and maybe not as deep as the SEC, 1 through whatever it ends up being, but the top 6 to 8 teams will be very competitive, I think. So that part of it, I think, can be really good. Creating games that matter is important for the sport because too often ADs and coaches are trying to find games that don't matter to puff up their record. So let's play some games that matter. And if you can get those automatic qualifying spots, maybe schools will be more willing to do that.
Keep you over a few minutes. Apologies there, but what do you and what do you and Joshua? What do you and Jason Swain have coming up the rest of the week on the show? 9 to noon, 99.1 The Sports Animal. Noon to 3. I'm all over the place. Noon to 3, 99.1 The Sports Animal.
Yeah, VFL's back-to-back. So Eric Haynes, shout out to him and Brian Rice from 9 to noon. But 12 to 3, Monday through Friday, we're talking Tennessee football looking ahead to 2025, the season. That's already begun, but a lot of hoops. Ron Slay on Tuesdays. You can always go back and podcast that if you miss it live. We had to move some things around this week because he was traveling, so available to podcast if you like. And we have our newsletter on Fridays. It's free. Thanks to everybody that has subscribed already. Would love for you to do that. Eric provides a link, joshandswain.com, if you want to sign up.
Josh, as always, man, appreciate it. We'll talk next week.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.